Welcome back. What's up, everybody? For this video, I want to go back to some stuff that I talked about in a video I did last week, which was about the descriptive assignment. So again, make sure you've watched the video about the descriptive assignment. Make sure that you've read the assignment sheet for the descriptive assignment that is under week 2. And like I talked about in that video, I just wanted to give you a little example of what I mean by descriptive language, what I mean when I'm talking about writing in a way that gives off a vibe, you know? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to throw up on the screen just the first page of a short story. Don't worry about this story. We're not going to read the story for this class. You don't have to worry about it. I'm just going to read out loud, and I'm going to try to put it on the screen so you can follow along. I'm just going to read the first page of this story, and while I'm reading it, I want you to think in your head. If we were in class, I would ask people for answers to these questions. But while I'm reading it, I want you to be thinking about what vibe do you get from this one page that we're going to read. What vibe do you get from it, and what specific words contribute to giving off that vibe? Okay, so I'm going to try to put it on the screen now. Okay, again, so while I'm reading, what kind of vibe does it give off? And how do we know? What words tell us that? Okay, here we go. North Richmond Street, being blind, was a quiet street except at the hour when the Christian Brothers School set the boys free. An uninhabited house of 2 stories stood at the blind end, detached from its neighbors in a square ground. The other houses of the street, conscious of decent lives within them, gazed at one another with brown, imperturbable faces. The former tenant of our house, a priest, had died in the back drawing room. Air, musty from having been long enclosed, hung in all the rooms, and the waste room behind the kitchen was littered with old, useless papers. Among these I found a few paper-covered books, the pages of which were curled and damp, The Abbot by Walter Scott, The Devout Communicant, and the Memoirs of Enoch. I liked the last best because its leaves were yellow. The wild garden behind the house contained a central apple tree and a few straggling bushes, under one of which I found the late tenant's rusty bicycle pump. He had been a very charitable priest. In his will he had left all his money to institutions and the furniture of his house to his sister. When the short days of winter came, dusk fell before we had well eaten our dinners. When we met in the street, the houses had grown somber. The space of sky above us was the color of ever-changing violet, and towards it the lamps of the street lifted their feeble lanterns. The cold air stung us, and we played till our bodies glowed. Okay, so what do you think? What kind of vibe do you get from this? A good vibe? A bad vibe? Is it happy? Is it sad? What would you say? I don't know. Maybe it'd be cool to pause the video and think about it for a minute first. But I'll tell you what I think. So for me, first of all, what I would want to point out here is that this is all just descriptions, right? Because I'm thinking about our descriptive assignment here. So nothing like, there's no action that actually happens in this one page. It's just describing like the setting and telling us a little bit about the background, describing what's in the backyard, what the house looks like, all that sort of stuff. So like nothing actually happens. It's just descriptions with descriptive writing, what we're doing. So the kind of vibe I get from this, I would say first of all, I feel like it's a negative vibe. I feel like it's, I don't know, maybe a kind of sad vibe, maybe a gloomy vibe. I feel like I've had students say it gives off sort of an eerie vibe. I think that's kind of where I land on it. I think it's definitely negative, and then like gloomy, sad, I think kind of in that range. Some specific words that lead me to think that. So at the start of the second paragraph when it said, the former tenant of our house, a priest, had died. So we have a dead priest. Seems bad, right? That seems pretty bad. It goes on to say, air, musty from having been long enclosed, hung in all the rooms. Musty. If something's musty, it's like stale, it's air that's like, you need to open a window. If the air is musty, you haven't opened a window, Other things. It says the waste room behind the kitchen was littered with old, useless papers. So he says old, useless papers, He could have just said old papers. Why useless? Because I think it adds to that negative vibe that we have. I think there's a vibe here generally of like decay, things that have been neglected. Another thing that makes me think that is when he talks about the late tenant's rusty bicycle pump. It's rusty. How does something get rusty? You leave it out. You don't pay attention to it. How does air get musty? That's a simple rhyming word. You leave it's inside too long. You don't open the window. You don't have a fan on. So it's all things that are like going bad, decaying, have been neglected. I love that phrase as well. Rusty bicycle pump. That's kind of fun to say. It's got a good mouthfeel on that phrase. It's very nice. He also says the books that he describes, he says the pages of which were curled and damp. The pages of the books are curled and damp, again, neglected, like decaying, going bad. So just some other words in the last paragraph. He says, when we met in the street, the houses had grown somber. If you guys know the word somber, it's kind of gloomy, kind of sad, kind of reflecting, but in kind of a sad way. And then it says, the lamps of the street lifted their feeble lanterns. If you guys know the word feeble, it's like weak or insufficient, And the thing to me is that there's like, it seems like, oh, well, that's just the way he wrote it. But like, there's so many other choices that you could have made with these words, that it makes me feel like it is giving off this kind of vibe. Like when he talks about the old useless papers, he says the kitchen was littered with old useless papers. He could have just said like, oh, in the kitchen there were some papers on the ground. But instead it's littered. What is litter? Something that's been thrown away, something cast aside, something neglected, right? It's littered with old useless papers. They're both old and useless, So it seems to me that the word choice here is pretty intentional, and that one of the things it does is just give off this generally like gloomy sort of vibe. But again, all that they're doing is describing what this place like looks like and stuff. So this is what I was talking about for the descriptive assignment. When you want to help the reader see the place you're talking about, you want to focus on what it looked like, sounds like, smells like, all those things. But you also want to try to give some of the emotion that you associate with this memory. Is it a happy place? Is it a sad place? I think that's a good place to start. And then you want to think about your word choice when you're doing this, just like the author did here. How can you try to use words that are going to give off like a kind of vibe, Okay, so I hope that makes some sense. And again, that's for that descriptive assignment. Make sure you've watched the video on it. Make sure you read the assignment sheet about it. And I believe it's due coming up pretty soon. So I would go check that out, Make sure you know the instructions. Make sure you know when it's due and all that good stuff. All right, that's all for now. I'll talk to you again later.